The other day I watched a video where a former CIA operative was saying, don't ever bug in. So is this right? Is this wrong? Does this apply to you? Well, let's get into that. Hey everybody, I'm Michael with Asymmetrical Preparedness. I was in the military for 20 years. I did a lot of different things. Lived off grid, been a prepper for 20 plus years, etc. So let's get into the topic right off the bat. Let's not waste any more time. First, what I want to say is his approach and what he was advocating for is saying that if you bug in, if you shelter in place, if you stay put, you're vulnerable. Well, to quote George S. Patton, fortifications are a tribute to man's stupidity. Yes, because if somebody is motivated enough, trained enough, and equipped well enough, and if they want what's in there, they're going to get in there. We may not be able to defend what we have at all times against all threats. That's a fact. But what this gentleman was advocating for was staying mobile because you can gather any resources you need along the way. He made a valid point that if you shelter in place, bug in, that you are limited to the supplies that you have, that you can't resupply. Well, they're not wrong, but yes, that's true. But even if you're bugged in, you can still go out in your area around you and forage for supplies, gather supplies, all those kind of things. His point was valid, not saying it wasn't valid, because he was talking about the ability to stay gray, to move without being noticed, clandestine movement, and gathering of supplies, and the ability to stay mobile, to stay ahead of the threats. Yeah, that is a very good point and a good way to go about doing it. Big if. I'm going to get into that big if in a minute. Let's talk a little bit more about bugging in. I still feel, that bugging in is still a valid option. Why do I say that? Well, because I think he was looking at it through one lens, and that lens was kind of like a total collapse of society. But we'll get into that more in that part in a minute also. So if you don't have total collapse of society, like say there's shelter in place orders for a new or say there's some localized chaos or a natural disaster, or your road is down or your power's out or whatever the situation may be, bugging in short term is still valid, 100%. So let's get into a little bit more about what he was saying and the points he was making. The ability to stay mobile. Yes, mobility is a very advantageous thing if you are set up for that. Here again, I want to backtrack, but we'll get into that kind of stuff. I want to save that whole wrap it up at the end. So let's cover some more bases. Really quick before I forget, some people have asked me, what is this coat I'm wearing? Well, it is a Fortress Tundra coat. This coat is amazing. I love it. I only endorse like two or three companies that I firmly believe in. And Fortress clothing is amazing. This coat is good from negative 20 degrees to 60 degrees. And their patented insulation keeps you warm whether you're wet or dry. So it eliminates the need for layers. Layering, you layer so you can take off the layers, because when you're bugging out, you don't want to get all sweaty and then stop in your layup position and then get super cold. That's the genius of their insulation, is that it keeps you warm whether you're wet or cold, so it eliminates the need for layers. So if you want to, check them out. Links in the description below and the coupon code to save you some money. bugging in does make you vulnerable. But being out there with less familiarity with the terrain, with less resources at your disposal, and probably fewer people at your disposal. That's kind of one of those things. This is why I talk about the need for having a mutual assistance group, a tribe, family, friends, neighbors, that kind of stuff. Bugging in may not be advantageous or smart long term, but short term it definitely is. And if there is a large event, I feel one of the best things to do is, if you have tribe, and if at least one of the tribe members has a location where they live that is more sustainable than others, like say having a garden, maybe having animals, maybe their location where their property is situated is more defensible, and you have the appropriate number of people to set up a proper defense. Pretty much in most situations, you need at least 3, usually 4 people to set 360-degree security. At least 4. But then those 4 people cannot sit on that position providing security 24 hours a day. They got to eat, they got to sleep, they got to go to the bathroom, they got to hygiene, all those kind of things. So you need a watch rotation. So you need 8 people, kind of minimum. And that would be in shifts. That'd be like 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 3 hours on, 3 hours off, something like that. I wouldn't say 8 hours on and that rotation, or 12 hours on. No way, because those people on post, their ability to process and to be awake and aware and highly effective diminishes very quickly. I would limit it to maybe 3, possibly push it to 4 hours at a time. That's why having 12 people on a 3-watch rotation would be even better. But I digress. That's kind of off topic. We need to get back to what I was talking about. Bugging in short term, yes. Bugging in long term depends on your tribe, on your supplies, on your location. Not just location based off of topography and defensibility, but what's your location to a major urban center, major population center, and what is the population in that area like? Do you live near Seattle where there's a bunch of entitled children, or do you live near some other a little bit large, maybe a little bit smaller city where you got a bunch of responsible adults that are prepared and have a different mindset? Well, these are all things to consider. There's tons of things to consider. Also, the availability of water close to your location. The ability, like here in Western Washington, where it falls from the sky all the time. But still having the ability to filter and treat that water, even if it comes from the sky. That's still very important. So there's a lot of factors, as you see. I'm not really going to go into all those factors in this video. We need to get to the good stuff. And like I said, where this gentleman said, the way he approached it isn't wrong. I'm not saying he's wrong in the least. But what I am saying is that his recommendation may not be the best for most people, for most preppers, because of these things. And this is the good stuff here. He was approaching the topic from a highly trained operator, a highly trained operative. I correct myself, but also highly trained operators, people with former military background like myself and other people that can effectively stay on the move. They know how to escape, evade, they know how to forage, they know how to find supplies, they know how to fight, they know how to stay gray, they know how, they have the endurance to do so also, and they know the lay of the land, and. If you have all those skill sets, like he was, talking about, he didn't go into that, but he was looking at it through that lens. Well, most people out there, probably most people watching this video, don't necessarily have all those skills. You may have 1 or 2 of them or something like that. Maybe you do have all those skills. And if you do, that may be an option. That's why my answer when somebody asks a question about preparedness or tactical stuff is usually, it depends, because that's true. It depends on a lot of different things. It depends on your ability, it depends on your age, it depends on your physical condition, it depends on your area, it depends on your supplies, it depends on your kit, it depends on so many different things. So whereas what he was saying was valid, I don't feel it necessarily is the best thing or the best advice for the common everyday person out there. I still feel that most people, unless you have those specific skill sets and you know how to do that kind of stuff, and you know how to move through an urban environment or a rural environment, and you're comfortable doing so, and you can survive out there, bushcraft skills, wilderness survival skills, urban survival skills, escape and evasion training and experience, then maybe bugging in short term, medium term, or long term may be your better option. Because at least then you know the avenues of approach to your property, to your house, to your apartment even. And you might be better off staying there and trying to defend what you have. Now, the situation may devolve and it may make sense to bug out. I've covered that all the time when I talk about bugging out versus bugging in. There may come a time in a lot of different situations where bugging out makes sense. You got to get out of there because where you're at, the situation is not tenable. You cannot stay there and live. So I hope you guys think about this. And maybe if you're thinking about bugging out, maybe being a little higher on your priority list, maybe your position isn't very sustainable for bugging in, and you know that more than likely you're going to have to bug out, well, start learning those skills. Start learning how to be gray. Start learning how to forage in your environment or wherever it is that you think you're going to be bugging out from. Process through your route and to. You need to know how to locate supplies and to move in that kind of terrain. Say you're in the city, so you need to start off with urban movement and gathering of supplies and gray. Then you move into suburban, you need to learn that. Then you move into the rural area, then you need to learn that. It's a lot of stuff to learn. Not saying you can't do it, but if you really want to bug out, you gotta have the skills. The idea of staying mobile in a lot of situations is probably a good one. So anyway, like I said, not saying he's wrong. I just don't think that the advice necessarily applies to the common, everyday, average person. So I hope you guys liked the video. And as always, thank you very much for allowing me to be part of your day. Have a wonderful day, and blessings to you and yours.